This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include former state senator, former chairman of the Board of Education, Howard Lee, syndicated columnist and author, John Hood, NC Policy Watch's Chris Fitzsimon, and also former state senator and former chairman of the Board of Education, Phil Kirk. Before we get started, we want to inform you that we are now beginning our 19th year of NC Spin, and this will be our 934th show. We want to thank our sponsors who underwrite this weekly offering, our panelists who take time from busy schedules to appear on the show, but mostly we want to thank you for watching and listening to us. A recent survey by McGuire Woods Consulting asked politically active North Carolinians about 24 different TV and radio programs on the air, providing news, analysis, and commentary about state government and politics. I'm proud to report that NC Spin was the #1 show on that list. An astounding 65% of politically active North Carolinians watch or listen to NC Spin, and we thank you for that. Well, this week we're going to talk about whether the repeal of HB 2 is on again or off again, some conflicting numbers on median household income growth in our state, and the insurmountable chasm faced by black males due to poor reading and math comprehension. And as always, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Once again, we came up to the edge of a resolution on HB 2, and once again, it came apart. Legislative leaders had agreed that if Charlotte would repeal the ordinance that triggered HB 2, the legislature would be called into special session and repeal it. But last Monday, Charlotte Mayor Jennifer Roberts blew the prospective deal up, saying the council would not take up the repeal of the ordinance on Monday night's meeting. Howard Lee, you were mayor of Chapel Hill, and you understand the duties and responsibilities that go with it. But it seems that Charlotte has lost more in canceled events and business relocations than any other city in the state. Why wouldn't Mayor Roberts want to end this nightmare? And was she right?
Well, I think the mayor certainly wants to end the nightmare, but I think she's up a tree without a ladder. And not having enough votes, in my opinion, to pass the repeal put her in a very bad position. So I'm not sure it's all hers. But at the same time, I'm not sure if I were in her position, I'd even trust the legislature. After all, they did go into special session, they went in the dead of the night, they took this action. And if she jumps out there, it's almost as if Charlotte's saying, we're responsible for this. Well, they're not responsible for it. It's the legislature that's responsible for it. They should take the first step. And it seems to me that that would be a place to start. And then they could go to Charlotte and work out some deals.
John, the proposal was that if Charlotte repealed their ordinance, then the legislature would consider coming back into session. And Howard's right, there was no ironclad promise on that. But help me on this. Why did they say Charlotte had to repeal the ordinance? Because hadn't they already declared it invalid? I mean, what was this? No, just a...
They had not declared the ordinance invalid. They had passed a state law that superseded it. If the state law had been repealed and the Charlotte ordinance there'd been no action on it, then arguably it would have been enforced. Now, keep in mind, lawmakers and the administration don't believe the Charlotte ordinance ever had the force of law. They don't think cities had the authority to pass these sorts of ordinances. But they wanted the Charlotte City Council to act. Just to be clear about this, Mayor Roberts did not lack the vote. She was adamantly against it. They were trying to pass it over her veto, and they didn't get there. I think the Charlotte Council should have acted. They could have acted conditionally. They could have said, yeah, we will pass a motion to repeal the ordinance conditional on the legislature repealing HB 2. That would have been enough to get the ball rolling. They simply didn't want to, and it's very clear from the evidence that Democrats in North Carolina, the Cooper campaign, members of the legislature actively prevented the bill from being repealed. And the Charlotte City, because they wanted to be on the books.
There's nothing to say that the legislature couldn't call itself into special session and repeal this thing.
Of course not. The governor could call them into special session. They could be in special session. And if you're going to accuse the Democrats of playing politics, the Republicans are playing politics too. They want to do this because they're getting a black eye before the election. Remember, the Charlotte Ordinance isn't what created the boycotts of businesses and the NCAA and the ACC and everybody else. It was HB2. There's nothing to prevent the legislature from coming back still and saying, okay, we're going to repeal HB2 and we're going to keep the Charlotte Ordinance voided. The legislature is in power. The Republicans have supermajorities. They have the governor's mansion. If HB2 is really hurting North Carolina, which they appear to think it is, and it is, come into session and repeal it. Stop trying to blame everybody.
Phil, one of the things I found interesting is the governor held a press conference this past week, and he said he didn't want this to become a political issue. Hasn't that horse already left the barn?
It's been a political issue on both sides, in my opinion, since day one, regardless of which side you're on. And now a lot of people don't want to. A lot of people want to change because they think it's going to help their party or their candidates. A lot of people on the other side don't want to because they think it would. Who knows? But I've got some slightly good news on this subject, and it's very hard to find any. From the sports world, the NCAA was going to make the decisions on the tournament, the championship tournaments, this December for the next 4 years. They've delayed it until sometime next year in order to give, apparently, in order to give the courts or the legislature and the governor, whoever, a chance to repeal it. One other point, there are 57 applications from Cary and North Carolina State and Wake County for NCAA tournaments. We got a chance at getting at least half of them if HB2 goes away, and we'll get 0 if it doesn't.
Howard, I think the big question a lot of people are asking is just how much of an impact is HB2 as it now stands going to play out in November 8th?
Well, I think HB2 is going to be have a very serious impact on the race. I'm hearing as I move around, a lot of people are really concerned about the image that North Carolina is experiencing with HB2. The fact that people like me and others who travel outside of North Carolina are looked at with jaundiced eyes. And I think people are really going to have that very much on their minds when they go to the polls to vote.
Yeah, John, both sides are sort of saying, well, let's just watch this thing play out on the courts now, in the court cases. But isn't that likely to take months or even years on appeal? And in the meantime, aren't we going to continue to rack up losses?
Yes. Let's wait for the courts. I understand people saying that, but it doesn't help you very much. For one thing, large chunks of HB2 and the Charlotte Ordinance that preceded it and caused it have nothing to do with what's being litigated. If the courts ruled one way or the other, it wouldn't determine the outcome. Remember that the Charlotte Ordinance was a public accommodation statute. It wasn't about high schools. So there's all sorts of unanswered questions. I personally think the Democrats in this case, I understand why they killed the deal in the summer, thought it'd be politically advantageous to keep the bill in place for a while longer. At this point, I actually think they miscalculated. They should have cooperated in the deal and made it happen. I don't think McCrory would have gained very much from this politically at this point. I think it would have actually made Cooper look better to be part of the solution. I think they miscalculated. I don't think it's going to hurt them that much, but I don't think at this point this is the determining issue.
So where are we on this? Is the deal off? Is there any chance whatsoever of getting it repealed or what?
The governor announced this past week that it's going to have to wait until 2017. And, you know, a lot of the people in Charlotte, not the city council people necessarily, although I think some of them did agree, if you repeal the Charlotte Ordinance, you do take away protections from people being fired in Charlotte because they're gay. I actually think that the legislature could also make a statement. If legislative leader Governor McCrory would say, we're worried about the public facilities part, worried about the bathrooms and showers, but we're going to come into session and also make sure that you're protected, you're not going to be fired because of your sexual orientation, that would have gone a long way. But they can't do that because the Republican base, a lot of the religious conservatives would go crazy. And so this is all tied up in the election.
I just think we're stuck with it for the remainder of this season and this year, and maybe next year the legislature will come in and cooler heads will prevail.
Well, we thank you for watching NC Spin on the air or on YouTube. Here's a reminder, there's much more on our website, ncspin.com, or NC Spin on Facebook. You'll find video footage not seen anywhere else, perspective pieces from our panel, and my weekly column. Get more balanced debate from the Old North State on ncspin.com, NC Spin on Facebook, or on Twitter at NC Spin Tweets. After these messages, we're going to talk about conflicting numbers about household income gains.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Vote. This single word is vital to the future of our nation. In the coming weeks, you will have the opportunity to cast your vote. It's your chance to shape the future of your community, state, and country. It's your chance to make your voice heard. I'm asking you as a fellow North Carolinian to encourage every family member, friend, and neighbor to cast their vote. On Tuesday, November the 8th, be a part of our future and go vote.
I help educate and inspire visually impaired students to strive for a brighter future.
I make sure visitors to the North Carolina Zoo take a walk on the wild side.
And I make sure that the fuel you buy is a quality product from pipeline to pump.
I support small businesses in North Carolina by matching them with hard-working, well-trained employees.
I make sure the roads you drive on are safe.
Scenic, the one voice speaking in support of the men and women who are making North Carolina great.
We now return to NC Spin.
We've talked before about North Carolina's improving economy. Governor McCrory likes to tout the fact that our state's economy is growing at a stronger rate than any in the region and throughout much of the nation. He repeats U.S. Census statistics, easy for me to say, that show the nation's median household income grew at 5.5%, while North Carolina's grew at 6.8%, 14th in the nation. It's still, however, about $6,000 below the national level. John, last week on the show, you reported some of these statistics, but you say since that time you found some conflicting data. Tell us what you uncovered and what you now believe our state's growth and median household income to be.
Well, before last week's show, I got some information from a professor friend of mine who had gotten the census data and sent them to me for median household income, and I referred to it a couple of times. Then when I decided I'd go and actually look up the data and write about it, I realized that he had sent me the household income measure from the current population survey, their annual supplement. They're real numbers, the math was accurate, but there's another survey called the American Community Survey that is much larger, and so it has a smaller margin of sampling error. The Census Bureau suggests that you use the American Community Survey. That one shows North Carolina's median household income growing slower than the national average. And that's an important piece of information. Now, the other measure, though, is important too because it's a broader measure of income, thousands of dollars more in income. So I wouldn't throw the measure completely out, but I should have explained that there were conflicting numbers. What I would say is that if you look at the entirety of all the economic measures that we have, North Carolina outperforms the national average and the Southeast average in the following areas: GDP, income growth, or personal income growth, employment growth, employment population ratio, unemployment rate if you include discouraged workers who dropped out of the labor force. One of the only major measures that doesn't provide us good news is this median household income measure from the ACS. I think it is a legitimate measure, but there's a lot of other stories to tell about the economy.
Well, okay, let's chase this rabbit for just a second. Why is North Carolina's median household income $6,000 or whatever the number is below the national average?
Well, it has consistently been below the national average for a long time, but there was a precipitous drop compared to the national average. Actually, starting in the late 90s, our income trends started to diverge. It did a little bit better in part of the 2000s, and then it really crashed in the Great Recession. We have not really climbed all the way back out of that cellar.
Chris, even with the conflicting data, is Pat McCrory correct? We just heard this past week our unemployment rate had dropped to 4.6% for the second month in a row, below the national average.
And we actually lost jobs last month, which is what we talk about with the unemployment. We lost jobs in a month, but our unemployment rate went down. So remember, the unemployment rate is a snapshot. It's not a useful measure, as we say when it goes up and we say when it goes down. I'm a little mystified why the governor's folks keep saying unemployment rate has gone down in all 100 counties since the recession ended. Well, I hope so. It's gone down in virtually every state in the country. It'd be a miracle if it hadn't, given the depths of the Great Recession. But I think the median income statistic is a big one. It is something. It's household income. It's how much money families have. We're not growing as fast as the national average. We're still significantly below the national average. It's a big deal.
Phil, if North Carolina economy is growing, then I think the question next is what's responsible for the growth. Now, is this just a cyclical trend that the entire nation is enjoying? Have tax reforms been responsible for it? Other government policies? What's been the effect of this?
I don't know that there's any one thing. All I know is our unemployment. The national economy has improved, the North Carolina dramatically. But so is North Carolina's. It's half what it was when McCrory took office. Does he get all the credit? No, but he sure doesn't get the blame if he had gotten the blame if it had gone the other way.
go back and let's remember in 1980 when Ronald Reagan was running for president against Jimmy Carter. And you remember his big catch line in that campaign was, "Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?" Howard, how would you answer that so far as the people of North Carolina are concerned? Are we better off than we were 4 years ago?
I personally don't think so, because I recognize there are a lot of people who have just pulled themselves out of the job market and are not either strung up on statistics or not even out there making an effort to get a job. I know that there was an article in the N&O this morning that reflected that to some degree. I don't think we're bad off, but I don't know that we're better off than we were 4 years ago.
Is it possible to extrapolate this data and look ahead? I mean, already we're talking about the 2017 legislative session, new elected officials taking office during this time. Can we expect this trend to continue, or are we just sitting around waiting to see if there's a momentous event or something?
Which trend? I mean,
the growth trend.
Yeah, well, I think generally,
look,
if the economy goes into recession in the next few months, which is not an impossible thing to imagine given the markers that we have and the length of the recovery, North Carolina is going to take a bath again. That's typically what happens. It is important, as Chris said, to distinguish between the unemployment rate, which comes from a relatively small sample, and the job count, which is a larger sample. North Carolina's jobs did go down 14,000 in August, almost all of that government jobs. This is probably a statistical quirk that has to do with how teachers are counted. They're actually treated as unemployed during the summer. So I'd like to see those numbers revised. A lot of times our summer job numbers are a little screwy, and you have to wait for them to get settled down.
And I'm really concerned about two factors. What's going to happen to gas prices as we go farther down the road, and what's the Fed going to do when it comes to interest rates? They've been
they met this past week and decided they were going to keep them low.
They signal they're going up.
Yeah, they've been acting like a fish with a broken spine.
They've been saying that for several months.
Yeah.
Okay, after these messages, we're going to talk about African-American males falling through educational cracks.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Helping people. It's all in a day's work for Wayne Goodwin. As Commissioner of Insurance, Wayne Goodwin's been a tireless advocate for North Carolina families, helping more than 100,000 seniors enroll in the Medicare drug plan while protecting them from insurance scams. And Wayne Goodwin has been fighting big insurance companies' proposals to raise rates for car, home, and health insurance. Wayne Goodwin, more than a public servant, a true friend for consumers.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, "Come on, we're leaving."
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
We now return to NC Spin.
On last week's show, we talked about improved high school graduation rates and fewer schools receiving D's and F's on school report cards. But one inescapable truth is that minority students, especially African-American males, are not making these gains. The Shot 50 State Report on Public Education in Black Males likened it to a practically insurmountable chasm of denied educational opportunities that consigns them to poverty and limited chances to succeed in life. What does that look like? In 2015, only roughly 1 out of 3 is proficient in reading and math in middle grades. Fewer than 1 in 4 high school black males were classified as college or career ready in math. Phil Kirk, you were former chairman of the State Board of Education. The number hasn't changed a great deal over the years. It's obvious some new approaches are needed, and as the former chair of the State Board of Ed, what are your suggestions as to how we can bridge this insurmountable chasm the Schott report
Well,
talks
frankly,
about.
we've been talking about it in education for at least 30 years, and I know 20 years ago I created Closing the Achievement Gap Commission, and Howard Lee and I happened to be at a funeral this week of Marvin Pittman, who was the director of the first conference. They had 400 people there, and the last year of the conference they had 4,500 people. So we got a lot of people looking at it, and Howard Lee, sure you're going to call on him, but he's done some work in the area. But I think there are a lot of things we can do or emphasize, and one is early childhood education. That is clearly something that every child needs, but especially from a low income. Number two, we need to make sure to continue to emphasize the emphasis on reading that the legislature has. If you don't know how to read by third grade, you're going to be a dropout or whatever. And the vocational high school approach, the early college approach, but they've got to have that early beginning. And then there's some things we need to do that we can't legislate. We need stronger families. We need more parental involvement. We need two-parent households. We need more support at home. The schools can't do it by themselves.
Howard,
it's a lot of things.
Howard, explain why the numbers are so much lower for African American males than they are even for African American females or even Hispanics.
Well, it's an attitude that is built into the schools. Most people recognize when boys come in that they have a priority of wanting to be athletic and engage in football and basketball. Girls tend to be more academic, and so teachers will give them a lot more attention in the school. The second is that many of these boys are coming out of communities where there are no male mentors or male role models. The role models are people who failed in school, and so they don't have anybody that says, here's what you need to do in order to be successful. That's been my life's work for the last 4 years.
I know that.
With grants from various foundations, the GlaxoSmithKline, the Pope Foundation, AT&T. We've gone into schools and really connected these boys with community resources.
Is it working?
And it's working. There's one principle, and I'd like to make the point that we don't have to have black male mentors and role models to work with black boys. We just need good people who are willing to spend some time. And there's a principal at Northern High School who put together a program for young black boys, 60 boys, and this year I got the numbers, they outperformed the entire school.
Wow.
I'm not one who believes that you can't save them if they're not reading at grade level by third grade. I think you can teach a kid anytime.
John, some of the people are saying that this performance, this chasm, underscores the importance of having more school choice for these students, either charters or vouchers. What do you think?
I think that's right. I think there are lots of different solutions, but I think that's one of them. And in particular, what Howard was talking about a moment ago, about so many of our young black males come out of families where the fathers are absent, where the whole community may be places where the fathers are absent. Those students in particular need often the structure that, for example, Catholic schools in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area or Raleigh area or down east, the Catholic schools, the other Christian schools provide. That's why I think opportunity scholarships are part of the solution.
What's your take on that? School choice and charters?
Well, I'm not convinced by the data that vouchers, unaccountable vouchers, that we don't know what the kids are learning and where our taxpayers are going, where kids are discriminated against, and we don't know, and they're learning all kind of crazy things. But look, this is a huge problem. I think the two chairs of the State Board of Education have a lot of good ideas. They've been at this a long time. I would also point out, I just looked it up before we started the show, the African American poverty rate in the United States is 27.3%. Poverty is not the only answer, but it's sure part of it. And unless we're going to figure out how to help these families, I think we're going to continue to fight this battle. I also do think we need more African-American male role models in most walks of life, and I wish we could get more of them into teaching.
All right, after these messages, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you. It's a fact. Patients who receive care in the medical home from a trusted family physician reduce healthcare costs through prevention, early detection, and affordable management of high-cost chronic diseases.
Every dollar invested in healthcare matters. Let's invest them wisely, building on North Carolina's medical home model. Better health begins with a medical home, a trusted family physician, the best return on our healthcare investment. Learn about the importance of medical homes at ournchealthcare.com.
I help educate and inspire visually impaired students to strive for a brighter future.
I make sure visitors to the North Carolina Zoo take a walk on the wild side.
And I make sure that the fuel you buy is a quality product from pipeline to pump.
I support small businesses in North Carolina by matching them with hard-working, well-trained employees.
I make sure the roads you drive on are safe.
Scenic, the one voice speaking in support of the men and women who are making North Carolina great.
We now return to NC Spin.
Well, we talk about this being an unrehearsed program. This part of it is particularly unrehearsed because nobody knows what we're getting ready to hear. That's when we ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Chris Fitzsimon, we'll tee off with you.
Public Policy Polling released its latest survey this past week, and it found Donald Trump up 2 points on Hillary Clinton, but Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate, had 6%. There were 7% of voters undecided, which is hard to believe, as polarized as our political debate is. But interestingly, those undecided voters, by 65, I think, or 60% majority, favor President Obama's policies, which leads you to believe most of those will vote for Hillary Clinton. In 2014, the undecided voters overwhelmingly didn't like President Obama, and most of them voted for Tom Tillis, and that's how he won. So how the undecided breaks will decide that election.
Interesting. Tell us something we don't know, Phil Kirk.
Hillary Clinton complained when the legislature reduced early voting from 17 days down to 10. Well, I heard that New York, where she lives, doesn't even have early voting. I didn't believe that. I went on the website, couldn't find it. So I called the New York State Board of Elections and asked them when early voting starts in New York. It doesn't. They have no early voting in New York.
Interesting. Howard Lee, tell us something we don't know.
I want to expand on my earlier comment. Matthew Hunt, the principal of Northern High School, created this Young Men of Progress group, 60 black males who are performing above the school average. He's now been moved to an elementary school. So my institute and Matt are going to join forces and try to do the same thing
in the early
grades, and then use the high school kids to come in and be mentors for the younger kids.
Oh, how interesting. John, tell us something we don't know.
Following up on Chris's point, we actually had 3 new polls out this week. I will update the polling averages in September in North Carolina. Clinton and Trump are tied at 43% apiece. Cooper is leading McCrory by 1 point, 46-45. And finally, Burr is ahead by 2 points, 43-41. What is surprising is the governor's race is where there are fewer undecided votes. There are more undecided votes for Senate and for president, and of course for Council of State.
And I will just tease the fact that next week on the show, we're going to do all politics. We got some great panelists on, so you want to watch that one. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, and read my weekly column, be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And join us next week when we'll have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.